Patellar tendinitis, jumper's knee, that's what we're gonna be going over today, and that's what we're gonna be teaching you how to fix today. So tune in, we're gonna go through a 3-step process on how we can slowly deload, reload, and overload so that you can become stronger and get back to sport without having so much pain. But first, what is patellar tendinitis? Patellar tendinitis is basically inflammation of the patellar tendon, so the tendon leading from your quad muscle down to the base of the top of your tibia right here. Lots of times with that, you'll have pain, stiffness, especially with things like jumping, hence why we call it jumper's knee. It's not to be confused with PFPS or patellofemoral pain syndrome, which is more associated with hip weakness. We see this injury most often in basketball and volleyball players, as it's more of a repetitive overuse-based injury that we often see with athletes who do a lot of jumping and a lot more impact sports. The first step to fixing patellar tendinitis is to deload from the activity that is causing the excess strain to it. To deload from that, what we need to do is take a relative rest from the sport. That doesn't mean you need to completely stop doing any sort of activity, but that does mean maybe we need to dial back on the volume of the activity that we're doing. So maybe we'll sit out those big jumping activities for a couple of weeks and instead focus on more strengthening based activities, things that we can slowly load into. So that brings me to our next point, which is reload. So with step 2 being reload, the way that we like to start reloading those tissues is through an isometric. So this can be almost anything you want. You can do wall sits, you can try single leg wall sits, you can do Spanish squats, you can do a decline step down hold. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, so long as it's pretty heavily quad based and we're getting the actual load through the tendon here for a prolonged period of time. When I say isometric, I mean some position that you're holding. Your muscle is not moving, you're not going through a full range of motion, but instead you're holding one position for a certain amount of time to really allow that entire load to distribute through the muscle into the tendon at a high intensity so that we can start creating those adaptations that we need. The reason why we start with isometrics is because they're such a static hold. By holding statically, not only can we allow that load to distribute really nicely and get those adaptations that we need, but it can also really help in the fact that it's not as aggravating as moving through a full range of motion. So acutely, many patients are able to tolerate something like this as opposed to something that they have to move fully through like a squat or a box jump. The next progression of the reloading phase is to start to reintroduce range of motion. So now that we've done isometrics and we're feeling good with those, we can start going back through the full range of motion of an exercise. Again, what we're really trying to emphasize here is quad-based activities. So things like lunges, Bulgarian split squats, step downs, even if you want to do some long arc quads, all of that is okay, so long as that we're really trying to target the quads specifically. The final progression of our reloading phase is to start to reintroduce those agility and plyometric movements. So things like squat jumps, box jumps, lunge jumps, anything that we have to move explosively with, we're trying to reintroduce those to prepare us better for our sport. Finally, after all of that, we should be back in our sport, participating pretty fully, and now it's time that we really start to overload so that these sorts of injuries don't happen again. What I mean by this is that after we come back to sport, we don't just stop strength training, we don't just stop training for our sport. Instead, we implement this program into our daily life so that we're doing preseason training, we're doing postseason training, that we're getting strong in the off season and during season so that our body is prepared to handle the movements that we require of it. So this means we're continually progressing in weights, we're continually overloading the activities that we're doing. Maybe we're adding some weight to our plyometric movements like squat jumps with weights, that kind of thing, so that our body continues to get stronger, faster, more powerful, and we're able to handle all the loads required of us in the activities that we love. In terms of dosing, it's gonna be really dependent on the person coming into PT and the activity that they're trying to get back to. Usually for the isometric stuff, we're going for something that's gonna challenge you. So generally, I like to work with my patients where they have a total of about 60 seconds of time under tension. They can break that up into a few sets, or a few reps, but doing about 60 seconds of time under tension for 2 to 3 sets to start, and then increasing weight instead of increasing time with those sorts of activities. The same thing goes for like our Bulgarian split squats or lunges, those sorts of range of motion type movements, is that I want those activities to feel hard. I'm generally not one of those PTs who assigns 20 reps of a certain exercise, but instead making sure that we're overloading it, that we're really getting the adaptations in the tendon that we need. So, with that being said, it is very individual, but just to recap this video, in order to fix your patellar tendinitis, we went through those 3 steps: deload, reload, and overload, right? Where deload is taking a relative rest from the activity that we're doing, meaning that maybe we stop so much jumping and instead focus on strength training. Reload is about the strength training, starting with isometrics, starting to work through a range of motion, and then reintroducing plyometrics, so jumping and agility-based movements. And then finally, overloading, meaning that we're doing this at a more specific pattern where we're really starting to increase the resiliency of our tendons, the resiliency of our body, and continuing to progress things to challenge our body and make sure that we can more than meet the demands of our sport. Remember, injury prevention starts in the off season, so make sure that you're doing some sort of strength training and preparation before you actually get into your primary season in order to help prevent injuries and make sure that you're staying safe and healthy. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button below. Or if you are interested in learning more about this sort of thing but don't know exactly where to start, reach out in the pinned comment below to learn more about us and how we like to work with people, and we'd love to hear your feedback.